Oh. Don't know what's happened. Hello. Sorry, my screen has just gone off. Not sure why. So I'm Freya, and I'm part of the Google Arts and Culture team at Google, of course. And so just to give you a quick introduction to what our team is, and then I'm going to dive into a few ways in which we've been experimenting with machine learning. So our aim is to give access to art and culture to everyone, and we work with the cultural sector, looking to make kind of the most of digital opportunities, and we also look at how we can preserve cultural content for the future. So the world is filled with, as we know, incredible artworks, objects, and we have a really rich cultural heritage. But most of the time, the world's population don't have access to this. And so we have the Google Arts and Culture app, which brings together artworks and cultural institutions globally in one place. Now, before I start, so an important housekeeping point is that all of what I'm going to show you belongs to the amazing museums, archives, foundations that we partner with. And we partner with 1,400 plus cultural institutions in more than 70 countries. And none of the artworks and things belong to Google. We simply host and kind of facilitate them on our platform. We also have a lab, and that's where I work developing creative projects. Now it's working, so that's the Google Arts and Culture. And then here's a little peek into our, what looks quite a messy lab there. So this is where we work directly with artists, especially those experimenting with technology. And at the lab, we bring arts and tech communities together to share ideas and explore new ways to experience culture. We host residencies, develop bespoke projects with cultural organizations, and we also facilitate discussion. We see the lab as kind of a place to ask what's next, what are the next tools for the cultural sector, and what new experiences can be crafted between technology and culture that can drive innovation in the sector. We're curious to explore machine learning and what it can do as a tool in the hands of artists, museums, or creators to create new experiences and help people anywhere discover art. And before I go on to some examples, I just wanted to look. So the question for today's session is, to boil it down, is kind of how machine learning is changing the art of the future. And I have a slight issue with the word changing, because to say change implies it's going to be something different, or it's to use instead of. And I firmly believe that kind of art as we know it will still exist. I think our ability to imagine and create is at the core of what makes us human, and artists will continue to express both the world we live in and imagine worlds. So I've just put together this very basic thing where this blue squiggly lines here look at in terms of where I think machine learning will play a part is in terms of the expanded set of tools that are available. And this may be a tool that artists use, or it may be used in terms of they may collaborate with machine learning, or they may use it, and something I'm interested in is how artists will use it and cultural organizations to kind of inform the creative process. And indeed, like photography of the past, how we talk about the relationship between art and technology isn't new, and there may be artists who use it as kind of an art form in itself. And so just to say, this isn't alien to us. It's since the beginning of time, artists have been using the tools available to them. And just to briefly touch upon, this is, don't know if any of you know what it is, but it's the oldest object, one of the oldest objects in the world. And it's a female figurine named the Barakat Ram. And we understand it comes from around Golan Heights, around 230,000 years ago. And it's currently at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And we don't know who created it or why it was created. But what we do know is it's a great example that artists have been using kind of the tools available since the beginning of time. And a flint was used to kind of craft the head and the arms. And so as the relationship between kind of arts and technology evolves, we've been inviting to the lab artists and creative coders and technologists to collaborate with our software engineers and to explore using various technologies. And in this case today, I'm going to show you some examples with machine learning. And one of the questions, so one of the artists in residence is Cyril Diagni, who's a digital interaction artist. And he creates poetic interactive experiences that empower users and cast a different light on the technology that surrounds us. And what he did is he looked at how we can experience art and culture and navigate hundreds of thousands of artworks online. I'm sure we're all familiar with kind of the vast amount of content that is online, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming, the amount of artworks and incredible artworks that are in the world. So you've seen landscapes in art, and here we ask the question, well, what about a landscape of art? And here, and I'll try and show you, hopefully it'll work in a moment, you can travel through hundreds of thousands of artworks from across centuries, and it's organized in this kind of vast 3D landscape. The more similar two works are seen by the computer, the closer they are. And this was, as I said, a collaboration between Cyril, who's in residence at the lab, and our software engineers. The algorithms only looked at the artworks, no metadata was used, and the visual similarity was calculated using a computer image algorithm used in Google search, purely based on the images. We then applied a Tisney algorithm, which is usually used to debug static images, to create this interactive virtual space. And I'll just show you quickly. So you can just explore freely, or we have some things where we've picked out, the internet.
It worked. It worked.
Oh, it is working. Hey, I thought it was going to be very blurry then. The internet connection isn't great. And so you can just see, I can spend hours kind of going through and seeing how it picks out kind of different artworks and groups them together. And also what's interesting is when kind of machine learning gets it wrong, as well as when it gets it right. And so just to show you, to briefly touch upon two more of our, another question we asked is, could artworks help to tag artworks? And in particular, thinking about kind of cultural institutions and the huge amount of kind of archives that they have, could machine learning play a role here? And so here the computer looked at artworks and tagged them with all it saw in the picture. There was no intervention of humans. And it allows you to explore anything from calm and happy to kind of hairstyles. And one thing that I found interesting is when we were looking at this, there was something called Bling Bling came up. And that had actually grouped all kind of gold jewelry and different gold artworks, which is very interesting that that's what it chose. And then just finally, before I pass on to Kenric, I wanted to show you, just briefly touch upon a third of our experiments that uses machine learning. And we spoke about this, Mario was on stage yesterday. He was a code artist who's been working with us at the lab. And he asked the question, is every artwork connected? And they say any two people in the world can be connected through friends of friends. We talk about the 6 degrees of separation. So how about artworks? And so using machine learning techniques that analyze the visual kind of features of artworks, this project was called X degrees of separation. And it takes us on a scenic route guided by kind of serendipity. So it allows you to discover surprising connections and artworks you might not otherwise have come across. So you'll see, you can pick the two at either side are the two artworks that have been chosen by the user. And then the algorithm kind of brings up a pathway based on visual similarity. And these are just some of our research projects. And we've put these out publicly, so you can view them on our Google Arts and Culture website, and also here, Arts Experiments. And this is just some of the ways in which we're collaborating with artists and technologists and having discussions with the cultural sector about what use machine learning may have for them. Thank you.
Thanks, Freya. So I'm here representing the group Artists and Machine Intelligence, which is a small group inside of Google Research and Machine Intelligence. We have 3 goals. Our goals are to develop a rigorous public conversation about machine intelligence. That means not just technically rigorous, but culturally rigorous, to influence research with artistic feedback and critique from the cultural ecosystem, and to support an emerging form of art making, which is artists collaborating with intelligent systems and with the people that build them. So I'm going to just talk about a couple projects as well. I like to contextualize this within tool making and within a longer historical context as well, in the sense that the tools that we make change our consciousness and change our cognitive modes and possibilities. There's actually some pretty interesting research by Dietrich Stout around this, but I'll skip that for today. And I also like to contextualize this within the history of photography and the development of lens-based practices that started with painting and go all the way through contemporary art photography to machine learning and big data-based systems that are based on digital photography. So you've probably heard of Deep Dream. This is I guess you would say, a canonical image of Deep Dream that was in a show that AMI produced with Gray Area in San Francisco. It was the first show of its kind. The reason we did it was because this image of Trippy Squirrel leaked onto the internet and basically forced Google's hand in terms of dealing with the generative capabilities of neural nets. I'm not going to go into the explanation of how they all work, but as you can see, it's very complicated with all these lines and circles. But yeah, so here are more images from that show. This was the inaugural event for our program. This is a piece by Memo Acton called All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace, the treatment of the GCHQ building in London. We've done some collaboration with dancers. We did some projections of Deep Dream, and this was all kind of the inaugural first phase of us being a public program. And recently, this same technology has been propagating into the hands of independent artists that don't work directly with Google. For example, this piece by Constant Dullart called Bubble, which is the class visualization of the bubble class in the ImageNet corpus of Deep Dream, which was fabricated by oil painters in China, shipped to LA to be car-coded, and then shown at Nicodeme Gallery. One of the artists that we work with, Ross Goodwin, has developed a practice of hallucinating text from neural nets. So what that means is generating, somewhat similarly to the way that Douglas X Group Magenta generates MIDI data sequences, Ross has built systems to generate poetry using AI. And so we went on a trip with Ross called Word Car. I guess the trip was called Word Car, the car was called Word Car, and it was the construction was a surveillance camera attached to a car running a neural net that generated poetry from various signals that were coming into the car through the camera, images, time and GPS location, data from the Foursquare API. I wrote an essay to sort of describe the experience of being there and to pull in some of the other factors that were influencing Ross in constructing the project. The literary canon that he was referencing, the relationship of AI poetry to other attempts to narrativize road trips, as well as the way that his project highlighted intersections of AI technology with changes in the industrial economy, with changes in food production, with changes in the way people live. And I think one of the most interesting possibilities with artistic projects that use AI, or new media in general, but specifically AI, is they pull in a lot of intersections of cultural factors like food production or industrial infrastructure or economic power structures in ways that because AI is so deeply embedded within all of these, they can't help but describe. So I'm just going to try to go quickly through these projects. There's a lot to say, and my brain's having a hard time figuring out what not to say. But one of the artists we work with, Rafik Anadol, uses the same Disney technology that Freya showed. This is a piece he did at the Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. We worked with him to build an interactive, immersive archive of the Salt Museum in Istanbul. You can see some of the architecture here. It's a circular room with projections on all sides, mirrors on the floor and ceiling that create an infinite tunnel of imagery. And within it, one can experience this 1.7 million item archive in clusters of image types that were determined by the machine learning that our colleague Mike Taika worked on with Rafik in his studio in Los Angeles. You can use this as a research tool. And here you can see the entirety of the collection visualized in a 3D space. Although the machine learning process really maps out features across these millions of archives in a much more high-dimensional space than 3D, we use a 3D system to visualize it. And so Mike also generated, using the hallucinatory techniques of deep dream, potential images that could exist in the archive but don't. So what you can see here are hallucinated documents from the Salt Museum archive. What that means is that the neural net looked at the entirety of the archive, or it analyzed the entirety of the archive, understood its statistical space, and then generated things that fit into that latent space. So as you can see, we're not functioning quite in exactly the same way as the Cultural Institute when it comes to, or Google Arts and Culture when it comes to dealing with archives. But the similar technical processes can be used in a variety of different ways. I feel like it's important for me to note that much like the Google Arts and Culture's relationship with their collections, our relationships with our artists maintain the ownership of the work by the artist, and we really step in as supporters financially and with technical resources to the artists. Our primary goal is to elevate their practices and to give them access to the technology as it's being created, to find new and interesting purposes for it, and to allow their practices to develop alongside it rather than, I don't know, something else. I feel like I'm probably out of time. Thanks.
Can you switch over to my, how do I?
Sure, which one?
All right. Those of you who haven't discovered it yet, there are headphones on the back of your seats that you'll find you're going to want as the day progresses if you want to hear anything other than low-pass filtered music from other rooms, which of course is really nice too, but maybe not as fun as hearing the talk. My name's Doug, and I'm really thrilled to talk to you all. Extremely happy to be here at Sonar. It's my first time here. My focus is really more on the nuts and bolts of machine learning. I work on a team called Google Brain, and I'm leading a project called Magenta, which is looking at the generative properties of machine learning. And my goal here in this short amount of time is to demystify somewhat what we're doing and give you an idea of just how human it all is. I actually think that the data-driven work that we're doing in machine learning is, it's the experiences of the world that we're filtering through different kinds of mathematical models to try to arrive at some different view of that. And there's in my mind, a certain beauty to it. And certainly, those of us that are doing this day to day, for us, it's a very creative endeavor. I created this project called Magenta. We just hit a one-year anniversary of being public the first week of June. And the goal is really to understand better how machine learning can play a role in music and art, and taking seriously from the onset of the project the idea that we won't know if we're doing well unless we're constantly sharing the output, working with artists, and trying to create something new. The Venn diagram maybe speaks for itself, but there's this idea that you have machine learning, but you also have the output, music and art, and this creative output that we create. But moreover, we also have this cultural aspect of what we're doing, and that's always there, no matter how technology interacts with art, whether that technology is a drum machine or a guitar pedal or a machine learning algorithm. It's there being used by artists, and that output is being evaluated by the public. And some people are going to hate it, some people are going to love it, and that's fine. We don't need to regress to the mean and try to please everybody. We're an open source project. If anybody here is a coder and you care about machine learning, please join us. It's a lot of fun to code models that make music, or to code models that manipulate images and try to make something new. It's a lot of fun, and we provide great support for people in the community that want to join us. The main thing I want to focus on here is the idea of representation. Fundamentally, I think a hallmark of cognition and relatedly a hallmark of art is this idea that we're filtering. Like our cognitive systems, our perceptual systems are overwhelmed with information, right? And we're constantly deciding what's important and what's not. And I hope you all agree, at least at a high level, an artist or a musician is doing that at even a different level than we are when we're just processing the world. She's deciding what's important. She's focusing on one thing at the expense of another. For us, doing machine learning, this relates very strongly to how we represent the problems that we're trying to deal with. I want to focus on a drawing project, and the reason I want to focus on it is it's one of the first pieces of work where we've focused, in terms of machine learning, that is, we focused on images not as pixels, but as strokes. So a pen stroke, or a finger on a touchpad, where we're modeling exactly where that stroke is going. And we were able to get data from a game called Quick Draw that was released by Creative Lab at Google, and train a particular kind of machine learning model to learn to draw. And importantly, the space that it lives in is the space of strokes. So I don't have time for animations here, but you can actually watch the model draw pictures. What the model's trying to do, here's your one slide of machine learning. The model's actually trying to do, and here's your takeaway, is it's taking the input from the world, and it's trying to stuff it into something smaller. At some level, there's always compression happening. That compression can be deciding, I care about this at the expense of that. That compression might be, I don't have infinite memory, so I can't memorize everything I see. But at some level, we're taking information, huge data sets, and we're moving them through some model that's forced to try to figure out what's important. Because if you're compressing well, then what you're doing is you're keeping the important bits, and you're throwing away the unimportant bits. So here's some new generated bits of yoga. Interestingly, color represents an idea called temperature, where if you turn up the temperature of this machine learning model, it gets a little crazier, probabilistically crazier. We're crazy people with our probability. And you can take a look at cold yoga, which I think I could probably do it on stage. And then you can also look at what you might call machine-learned hot yoga and try it at your own risk. These are unconditional generations. That means the model's just dreaming these up and spitting them out. These are not from the training set. Furthermore, in terms of keeping what's important, this model is able to learn what you might think of as an archetypical idea. I mean, please, I'm not trying to get too philosophical, but what's the archetypical cat? Well, if we feed in a cat with no eyes, the cat might draw some eyes in. And left column, third one down, if we feed in a cat that is missing a whisker, when we reconstruct that cat, the model actually puts a whisker back in because it normally sees one there, and so that's what it's learned. Furthermore, if you put in top right, if you give the model trained on pigs, an 8-legged pig, it will actually reconstruct a 4-legged pig because that's what pigs have, are 4 legs. And obviously, it doesn't have these concepts with labels. This is simply a mathematical model that's trying to learn as much as it can about the variance in the data, but it still has this really, I think, cool effect. And my favorite, I think, of all of them is David Ha, who's the main researcher, took a truck and fed it through the pig classifier, and look at what it reconstructs. It reconstructs what could only be called a pig truck. Like, it's like a truck. Like, I could not, if any of you in the room, it's the middle right, if someone said, please draw me a pig truck, could you do a better job than that? I mean, I could not do a better job than that. So I think it's really interesting to close this idea that one reason this model does what it does is we made the decision to train on what humans do, basically the motor movements of drawing. at some level, the idea of what a pen is doing, not what pixels are doing. This model doesn't know about pixels. It knows about strokes. And it gives us a kind of expressivity that I think we wouldn't get if we were working with pixels. We can even do vector math. Ignoring for the moment how this works, if we add and subtract in that compressed space, we can take cats and subtract their cat bodies and add pig bodies and things like that in a way that's certainly amusing. Representation also matters for music. We do more work in music than imagery, but I thought that that project was a better illustration of what we're doing. In the couple of minutes I have left, I want to show you 3 bits of music generation. So I think you'll want your headphones on if you don't have them on already, if you can find a pair. I'm not presenting these as being amazing. I'm presenting these as being, think of them differentially. And what you're going to hear are the same basic kind of model, but trained using different representations of music. And in this case, all 3 are musical scores. So we're talking about MIDI. We're maybe talking about a MIDI performance in one sense, but we're not talking about audio. These are all just rendered in Logic using the Steinway piano patch. This is not about the audio. The first one, though, the assumption that we made was that we're only going to care about something at the level of 16th notes. So we're going to just sample the score 16 times a measure, OK? And we're not going to care about expressive timing and dynamics. And we're only going to care about melodies. So there's no polyphony at all. And these decisions already impose a kind of flavor to what we can make with that kind of model. And there is no internet connection. And why is that? Are you online? You have to be.
Freya was able to.
Yeah, hold on. Shift reload. Wow, what a punchline killer. Like, and here's what it sounds like. We must be online. Let's try again. Apologies. I really hate skipping through slides like this. All of my audio is dead. OK. Can I unplug the headphone jack and plug it into my phone without making too much noise? It's OK? OK. Let's try the backup. All right. For those of you who saw me playing with my phone during Kenric's talk, it was because of this. I promise. OK. Trust no one. That's what I say. All right. The first one, I had this. Oh, I know why I'm playing a video. I apologize for this. OK. My videos. All right. We're not going to see them on the screen. This might work. OK. So that's, but don't go to another video. Simple melodies, models can learn to predict what notes are coming next and find kind of Western tonality. It's not a problem. What's quite interesting, I think, is if you simply move on to trying to tackle the idea of polyphony. That's not me. This is what happens when YouTube plays the next video. We'll probably hear an ad, by the way. So interestingly, this is the same, roughly the same model, but now it's got the underlying idea of how to handle polyphony, and it's trained only on piano. And I think what you'll hear, sorry if you couldn't hear the first one very well, technical issues. Let's try to listen to this one and get an idea about what we have. So that's not terrible for a machine learning model. I mean, there was a little bit of deeper structure there. We could talk for hours about where the real challenges lie here. But what I wanted you to hear with your ears was just this idea of saying, OK, we care about polyphony. We care about the vertical. It already gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of expressiveness in a model than you can get if you're only caring about harmony. And now this last one, and I'll close with this. This last one, we're actually also learning from music performances and paying attention to the velocities and the timing of the playing. So now we have velocity. Actually, we had timing in this one as well, but now we have velocity. Now this one's a little bit subtle, but because the model did not do any sort of crazy dynamics. But I hope what you'll hear is a little bit more almost delicacy to the playing, because it's trying to understand what people do when they play well this kind of piano music. So in closing, think of those as raw materials for being artists yourselves. I don't think we really care about living in a world where we press a button and listen to these. These are demos to help you understand what we can do. But as we understand better what we can do by following musicians' leads and understanding computationally with machine learning issues like timing and dynamics, in drawing issues like what do people actually do when they draw, I think we can, as we move actually closer to what we do as artists and as musicians and understand that better, I really do believe we can build new kinds of expressive tools and say different and new things with machine learning there to help us out. So thanks for your attention.
We have time for a couple of questions, and I wouldn't want to monopolize the mic, so feel free right now to ask about things that might not be clear, or over there.
So Freya, you mentioned when machine learning gets things wrong.
Yep.
Does it really get it wrong, or is it just doing it exactly what it should be doing? Because that's what it's been coded to do.
Well, and this is where it comes into kind of a broader thing around. So there's one around kind of bias in machine learning and in terms of who's training the machine. But I think it depends how you define wrong. So in terms of what we see, so interestingly, sometimes the artworks may put a horse, often a horse, in places where actually there were no other horses, and it was like, why did it choose that? And I think it's interesting, in order when developing it, to ask, like, why has it made that decision? But I think it comes down to how we define what is right and wrong.
I have another one here, another one here. Can you please maybe make all the questions together, so we make a round of questions and then you can reply together?
I have a question regarding your model. How far into the future is the model predicting or inventing notes? Because usually when you have a song, you have parts which are repeating itself. You know, the melody is usually repeating. Is it only one song? Because in the talk yesterday, one note, because in the talk yesterday, I heard it was only one note after another.
Do you want me to wait on?
Yeah,
okay.
We take two here and we finish.
You wanted to do all the questions in order, right?
Yeah, no,
okay.
This one and then...
Oh, I'm sorry,
okay.
I didn't see.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. Do you think that this kind of model can be applied also to events? So feeding the machine with events can predict a possible event in the future, something like that? Like Asimov?
So should I respond? Okay, trying to figure out the rules. So first, the most basic model we could talk about is actually doing next step prediction called autoregression. So it's trying to predict what's coming next. But that's clearly reductionist with respect to music, right? No one writes music that way. And it's really hard to pick up on this repeating structure using models like this. So think of that as a building block for more complex models that are actually caring about this kind of what we call non-causal, non-left to right prediction and trying to chunk things together. Generally speaking, yes. I mean, we can do event prediction. I mean, time series prediction can range from the stock market to trying to predict the weather, to trying to understand what's happening with a signal from your heart, to yeah, anything.
You know, Doug, there's a really good precedent for event prediction using models, which is astrology.
That's great.
Ready? We have here and then here.
Okay. So have you experimented with machines making music for machines, or something analogous to music as opposed to making music for people?
Yeah.
And here and here.
Hi, so I guess my question is a little bit more philosophical around what you're doing. Because it feels to me like a lot of what you're doing is in a way replicating kind of creativity and how we kind of process and see patterns in things in creativity. And I guess a lot of the time we talk about technology, but we don't talk about the impact in terms of on economics, on people's jobs, futures. Do you reckon there's an economy for human purpose?
I think we can all take the second question, and maybe the first one. What was the first one?
It was about music for machines.
Oh yeah, so making music for machines to listen to. I think, of course you could, but I very strongly believe that art is about fostering communication between people, and that what we're thinking about here with machine learning and AI is akin to what we've done with technology and art for the history of art, as Freya pointed out. You can say new things with an electric guitar and an amp and some guitar pedals. Then you can say different things than you can say with an acoustic guitar. And our goal is that we can say interesting things that we couldn't say before using machine learning. And that what matters about the machine learning is that it itself is doing pattern recognition and trying to add some things. But I don't see it as subtractive. With every new technology, we've seen fears that technology will displace art. You can go back and read about the uproar with the film camera, the uproar with pre-mixed oil paints, et cetera. I'm really, really genuinely optimistic that in this case, people are going to continue to use technology for art, and that it's the people that are going to keep driving.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that the difference between statistical pattern recognition and the sort of human use of pattern recognition, I mean, I think a lot of people, I'm always asked, like, is the machine being creative, or they want a narrative around machine creativity, and what we're really talking about is like pattern recognition, and that is part of the creative process, but it isn't the entirety of the creative process. And as far as, the common area between creative use of AI or machine learning and the larger economic impact is automation, right? And so I find it valuable that artists can speak to that question by using these systems, and that's what I was trying to get at with some of Ross's work. But I think at the level of writing a headline, it's very hard to be this nuanced, and so I know we're all very careful to do that, and part of our missions individually and as a collective is to have a conversation with that level of nuance. But when you're trying to get clicks, it's hard to do that.
Yeah. No, and I think just to echo what Doug and Kenric have said, in terms of kind of the work we do at the lab, it's very much working with the artists and looking at it, either looking at it as an aid for creativity, so how the artist actually works with it. And to me, a live experience is the most important thing, just in everyday life, when I spend more and more time kind of on computers and things. And I think as humans, that will, it will always, our creativity and our approach to creativity will always kind of be at the forefront. I think then another area where it's interesting is in terms of for the kind of cultural organizations. And, I talked about kind of the tagging and kind of navigating. When you think about the huge archives, when you go to, museums, and you don't get to see, and that serendipity of what it might help you kind of uncover, I think is interesting.
So the bad news is that we don't have more time for questions. The good news is that I'm sure that Doug, Freya, and Kenric are happy to talk to you now, because we have still 15 more minutes until the next session. We just have to change the stage. Thanks a lot to the three of them for a great panel. And in 15 minutes, Dan Gray is presenting his little video game called Monument Valley 2. You may have heard of it. So see you soon.
Thank you.